Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 135. Tyler Pigott, building a thriving business, vision as your ultimate decision-making tool. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today we are joined by Tyler Pigott. Welcome to the show, Tyler.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt. It's going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So Tyler he's been in marketing, communications, and sales for over 20 years. And he is the CEO and founder and CEO of Loan for Creative, right? A digital marketing agency, I believe.
Yeah.
And also does some speaking, biz coaching. So a lot of experience. And we're going to talk, we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. I'm excited about this because we can connect on a few topics here, I think.
So for sure.
What we do here on The Builders, especially the first time somebody's on, is to talk a little bit about your story, to see, where you come from, how you landed where you are today to become this awesome person you are today, and who influenced you. What was that ride like? So I'm going to hand...
That's a good way to describe it. The ride, for sure.
So talk about the ride. I'll hand it over to you.
It's so funny because when anybody reads that quick bio and it's like over 20 years, I go, well, that just means I've had 20 years of falling on my face to try to figure out,
I get it.
what to do next. So, lots of, I think everyone's life and career and all those things are almost more described as a roller coaster. Than anything else. So, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So kind of I've always known at some point I would do something a little more entrepreneurial maybe than the average. But my dad grew a couple different businesses, some a little bit larger, 500-600 employees.
Wow.
And so I kind of just grew up in that environment, right? And so if any of y'all listening, or Matt, if you have kids, you kind of are like, my kids are growing up in this environment. Interesting, And so that's how it started for me. My dad got out of his last business that he ran kind of when I was in college, I guess, probably college time frame. And it was a little bit of a messy kind of ending for that engagement for him. And he essentially, like a typical college kid or whatever, my parents helped me with some of the beginning years of college. And then when I was a sophomore in college, I just got a call from my family saying, hey, you're on your own, starting tomorrow. That was an abrupt experience. I'd had jobs throughout high school and throughout, college to that point. But when you kind of have to flip the switch and go, I need to pay for everything. Like this is, I've got school tuition now to hit, and I've got room and board, and I'll forget the beer money, if you will. Forget that. I'm just like going, hey, how do I survive? Yeah. So it was a pretty intense season, but at the same standpoint, it really did help kind of grow like that kind of working muscle, if you will, in me really fast. I grew up working hard and actually grew up on a Christmas tree farm early on, and so learned how to work hard on that standpoint. But, sometimes life kind of chucks stuff at you. You've got to figure out how you're going to respond. And so in the midst of that, I actually started a DJ company, kind of did little light stuff kind of late high school, but then in college I started spinning that up. And actually did pretty well getting to work kind of 3 or 4 nights a week, weddings, college parties, corporate events, all sorts of different things. But it was a great kind of, cut your teeth, if you will, on how do you go out and find a client and work with them. And they've got things that they bring to the table. You've got things you bring to the table. And And that was an incredible experience, I feel like, at the beginning. And a lot of it was because there was a desperation that I needed to,
Right.
provide for myself. And so you do navigate things differently when that's the case. So anyway, so that's how it started. I majored in communications broadcast, jumped into, I got married right out of college, and then my wife and I actually lived overseas. We lived in Africa for about a year and a half, and then in the UK for about 2 years. And in the midst of that, kind of started pursuing some of the stuff that I got excited about, which was broadcast and communications. And so worked at a couple different odd jobs, almost like internship kind of things, kind of overseas, and then moved back, worked at a recording studio, was an audio engineer in a recording studio for quite some time. And in the midst of that, this was like early 2000s. So call it, this would have been maybe 2002, 2003-ish timeframe. Right when studios were starting to build render farms. So if people remember back that far, think about like early Pixar movies and some of those types of things when they're trying to like draw a picture and then draw another picture when they moved a little bit more,
right,
and draw another, and then all of a sudden that kind of flip book, if you will, turns into a full-length film. But you need a lot of horsepower from a computer standpoint to do those. And so I just kind of volunteered to be on this, committee, if you will, for lack of a better term, to help build a render farm in the studio. And so I learned how to wire servers together and kind of, so many different pieces to that, from fiber to switches to not all the boring, the technical stuff and hardware and whatnot. But I learned how to do all that on the software side and hardware side. And so pretty quickly, companies, I'd started to work like moonlight, if you will, nights and weekends kind of thing for companies looking for server farms and all sorts of things. So the technology side of things. So anyway, that was like the intro in my mind for like more like the tactical side of kind of communications. And, there's the upfront side where you're kind of messaging it, getting out in front of clients. And there's the back end, if you will, of creating material and all that kind of thing. And so that's really the first like decade of my career was more so on the back end, if you will. So a lot of design, audio production, video production, been on both sides of the camera, all that kind of stuff. And then probably, this would have been maybe 2006, 2007 timeframe-ish. Got the opportunity to go work at a startup, and they were a biotech startup, really well funded. And they were buying technologies. And so they would buy these technologies. Some of them might have had products. Some of them might have had a light brand. And I got to work on a team that helped rebrand and then take those products to market. And so I did that for about maybe 8 or 9 years. So yeah, kind of to 06-ish time frame. I'm trying to give reference, but probably like 8 or 9 years. And one of the products was a consumer beverage product that I got to run with and rolled it out into a test market. Learned all the ins and outs. And again, this is kind of back when in a startup land, and this is I would almost call it like early stages of digital media, because there wasn't like very much where you could track. So I just remember sitting in, board meetings and those types of things going, well, what happened? What lever can we pull to do this? Or how do we sell more of that? And you kind of had to have an answer. And I got to work with some people that were well seasoned above me in career, people that, had worked at a high level at Gatorade, and people that worked at Lay's potato chips, and different brands that were really well established, and they just knew what they were doing. So it was a really cool experience, but also really nerve-wracking. And so kind of really learned the ins and outs of launching products. We probably launched, 15, 20 different ones underneath that brand. And so anyway, so that was a really fun experience, learned a ton from that. I got to the spot where I was traveling probably 2-3 weeks a month. So I'd leave, on a Monday and then do pitches to distributors, to grocery stores, to, big corporate stuff. And really cool experience, right? So all that stuff was really fun. Lots of sports teams in the midst of that. So I've gotten to work with tons of pro athletes, which is what was a really fun highlight.
Nice.
But I also had young kids at that point. And so, at some point you kind of go, I'm missing out on the stuff on the other side of my life.
I knew you were going there too. As soon as you were talking about the 2-3 week or weeks a month, I'm like, it's going there. It's going personal now.
Yep. Yeah. A lot of people, talk about business travel, and they're like, oh man, that must have been cool. And you're like, the glamour of it wears off after a couple trips, and then you then it's just a grind a little bit. And so anyway, fast forward probably about 3 or 4 years of living that life. And There was essentially what happens. So I live on the West Coast, for those of you listening elsewhere. And the West Coast is a long ways away. Might not seem like it, but it really is, because the minute you say, hey, we need to fly to the East Coast every week, basically add a day on the front end at least, and add a red eye on the back end to like make it back and forth. And so really for me, it was just a kind of a clear, like, well, I might not be the right guy for this anymore. So transitioned out of that, and then kind of just got opportunities. Like, so it was, hey, this person wants me to do a little bit of consulting here, or like meet with them and consult on this thing over there. And, kind of just pieced it together a little bit. And I live in the backyard. So I live south of Seattle. And so I live in the backyard of, like, back in that time, Amazon's, truly ramping up, and you've got Microsoft that's established, Starbucks that's established, Boeing, so many different, brands are based out of there that are really big and have grown a ton in the last, decade plus. And so there was an option to go work in that kind of corporate environment, but that didn't sound that appealing to me at that point. And so, started, like I said, kind of, linking things together, and back in that spot, a little bit of, now what do I want to do, and how am I wired, and what do I get excited about, and what do I want to do for the next, kind of 5 to 10 years. So pretty quickly, those engagements, if you will, that people would reach out for from a consulting standpoint started to grow a little bit, and I started to need help. And so I'd bring in, a contractor here, or a freelancer there, or a friend over there, and you'd kind of tag team on those things. And then, kind of fast forward a couple of years, those engagements were much larger and more frequent, and I needed a team. And so kind of probably 2015, 2016 started hiring full-time employees, and kind of starting building an agency of what it is today. So that's kind of a couple, rabbit holes in there, but that's kind of a little bit of a linear path of my story.
Yeah, linear.
I mean, I won't throw in that I was a college golf coach in the middle of that, because I wanted to play golf, and that was just a natural next stepping stone.
I know you left out just a ton of stuff, but they're still left with a ton of stuff. It's that journey, it's amazing. There's a few people out there in the world that they, like my wife, who graduates from high school, goes to college, knows exactly what they want to do. Now, of course, she's not exactly happy. She wished, in hindsight, she wishes she had a different career. She's in healthcare. Sure. But she's always had the same path since she was a kid, a young person. She's, in 30 years, 35 years yet later, whatever it is. And, but the rest of us who have had this all over the place journey from, and just figuring it out, doing something for a while and learning, and everything you do, you're learning something different. Like, I was, like for me, it was, I was in sales in my 20s, learned a lot about sales and literally selling things door to door kind of thing, business to business, and even Encyclopedia Britannica and Kirby vacuum cleaner, believe it or not. But
the classics.
The classics. I don't know. That's totally. But with you, it's the same thing. It's like like for me, I went to all these other different, completely different industries, completely different things, learning all this stuff you learn. And that's it's almost, I don't know if it's an unnatural, how uncommon it is, or how common it is or not. But I think that's especially if you're an entrepreneur, or if you're somebody with that kind of background, it's like, that seems like we all have that common journey, like, of just chaos and trying different things and failure, and that didn't work out, and what am I going to do next? And but
I feel like lots of people have it, even like in the corporate. So like, I think your wife probably has it too. I mean, just for that as an example, but you might stay in the same industry, I suppose, but oftentimes you're not in the same job. Like, I just don't think that is as frequent as it was in decades past or generations past. So you might, try something and, I didn't quite like that, but I'm going to move maybe even to a different position in the same company or same organization. Right. But I feel like a lot of people that I've talked to that are kind of in that, I'll just say 40s and 50s category of kind of that generation. I feel like that's pretty normal to move around to figure that out. My journey has not been normal, and it doesn't sound like yours has either, but maybe it has been. I mean, maybe I don't know everyone's story.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people do end up jumping around a little bit. But you don't really know until you tried, like, I mean, I learned how to sell in the grocery business basically.
Yeah.
And so I just remember I have a couple like funny stories of selling like, and you like, if you think about kind of back in the day, and still that brand is still, they still act very similar, but you couldn't show up in jeans, Birkenstocks, and a Hawaiian shirt to Kroger, but you could to Trader Joe's and to Whole Foods. Mm-hmm. And so like I would have like 3 or 4 outfits in the back of my rental car, because you'd kind of like change, and you'd want to look the part, because they wouldn't even like look at you if you weren't kind of somewhat, fitting into their brand.
Right.
And then it was just a funny experience to like the first number of stores I'd walked into. You would have to know who the distributor is, that their preferred distributor in whatever kind of section you're at in the store, before you talk to them, but you didn't know how to find it out until you talked to them. And it was just this like classic cycle of trying to figure it out. But like, I mean, there's no better way. It's like when you describe door-to-door sales, there's really no better way to learn how to sell something. Yeah. I mean, you're just kind of like thrown in the deep end without a floaty kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, then, and I think it's a really great way to learn it.
Yeah. And not only that, I mean, you like, for me, I would gravitate to every book I could find, even tape, cassette tapes.
Yeah.
Totally. Of all the big, salesmen out there that were teaching, and Zig Ziglar's and all those, mm-hmm. But that's the thing, like even when because I got into insurance sales, and I was doing insurance for like a decade, and for a while with another guy for an agency, and I kind of went out on my own, and I was doing life insurance, and there was different systems I used, and every system, but every time you learn something new, and the things I learned there way back then is I'm applying today, here and there, it influences you, right? All those lessons, good or bad. I think the variety is really good. I talk about this. I know a few times on this podcast I've mentioned it, but I don't know, this is like almost 10 years ago now. I had probably 2014, 15, I had a friend that he's been in business. He's done very, very well for himself, still does today. And cool. But we were talking, and I'm like, I'd pivoted to doing web design development. And I was just saying, like, I wish I would have done this so many years ago, like 20 years ago. Why wasn't I like in like software or doing this stuff? Because I just love what what I'm doing. And he just kind of stopped me. He says, "No, Matt." He's like, you don't want to change all that, because that makes all those different experiences. I did internet marketing, I did insurance, I did this and that, and all that has made you who you are and unique. And that's kind of your power, like you can, draw from that. You can set yourself apart. So I'm sure all those things that you did in all those years has defined you and made you special, right?
Totally.
Hopefully in a good way.
Exactly. Some probably not so much, but yeah, no, it is interesting, because I feel like there are times as you kind of, or I guess, progress in your career, or whatever you'd want to call it, where you can draw really specifically from things. Yeah. And then there's others you go, I have no idea why that happened, but I'm sure I learned something, and so I think it's been interesting in the agency space we have scaled because of systems and processes, but I wouldn't have learned that unless I had to figure out how to pass health inspections in big warehouses and carry, because you have to document it all. And at that point, I think still in a lot, it's in 3-ring binders, and you've got to write all the systems and processes down, and you've got to hire temp labor, which means you got to train them really fast. And, and so just like that whole process, I've pulled from that learning so many times, from just even the systems and process. And then you think about, like, we break down, so many agency owners and creatives have such a hard time with understanding kind of like financial models and margins and all those types of things. But man, if you grow up in an industry that, not really grow up in, but be part of an industry where you kind of cut your teeth, where, you kind of go, if I can save 2 cents on every bottle cap, that's going to equal X million. Okay. You just learn a lot from that scenario, and then you bring those things forward into the next.
Right.
So I totally agree with you, where, just you learn and pick so many things up in different phases of your career. Because I've had the same moments where I've gone, man, I wish I would have done this earlier, or I wish I would have done that earlier, and or someone has done it earlier, and you're like, man, I wish I would have followed in those footsteps or something, and but I wouldn't be where I'm at now because I wouldn't have the same kind of past experiences to help me learn from. So I guess it's just part of that roller coaster of ups and downs of life, and professional and personal. So.
And you don't know at the time because like when I was doing internet marketing, I did that for like a decade after insurance. And I was doing affiliate marketing, all this stuff. I learned a lot about the web, but I failed. Right, I didn't fail. Well, I had good years, but at the end, I burned out.
No massive success at the end.
And I kind of fizzled out, right? And I felt really bad about it at the time. And you can't, you don't have any foresight like where you're headed, what's going to be in the future. But that ended up, even though that all ended, that block of time informs what I do today on the agency side, because I learned even though I'm focused on web design development. All that stuff I learned about marketing, and I can have really good that's why I partner with digital marketing agencies and all that stuff, because I have that background. I can speak to speak and know the domain, and I can translate what they need. And so that's, even if somebody listening to this, you're in that spot where it's like, man, my life is shit right now. Everything's failing around me, but you may look back at this years from now and be like, I'm glad I went through that. I learned some lessons and everything else. So so you got all that, stuff that you went through.
Chapter 1.
Yes. But I love too that there was a point in time we're talking about, you're looking at your family, you're not spending enough time at home, and you're trying to figure out your next steps and what your life, what would make for a better life, not going back to corporate, and finally deciding to, maybe I'll just start doing this stuff. Maybe, I don't know if you called it freelance in the beginning, and and you just kind of, and that part of it too is interesting, because I have a kind of a parallel with that as well. When I started my agency, is I was kind of doing things on my own, and I had people I could contract out to do specific projects and things. And in the beginning, it was me solo, but getting help. What was that process like for you? Like, was it a conscious process where you knew that, okay, I can just bring people in case by case, contract? When did you decide, or what was the decision to finally hire somebody as an employee and start building a team that was more permanent in your agency?
Yeah, good question. I mean, part of, even like looping back to things I learned along the way, even like when I early career worked at a studio, I kind of had there was a creative team that would produce things. Right. And so it wasn't like I had a role, a part in the assembly line, if you will. And then jumping into, kind of the startup space, one is that all my startup experience was run by people in corporate. So it was run like a corporation, that's how it was. Right. And so, like I kind of learned from a lot of that. But like the team that launched the beverages that I got to be, I think I ended as something in business development, vice president of business development or something like that. But there was probably 40 people on that team. And we worked with, I don't know, I easily 25 plus agencies. So I kind of had this back past of how things could operate. Right.
So you had kind of a model you could kind of think about.
A little bit. Yeah, at least enough things I could kind of pull from. Right. And then pretty quickly in the midst of, jumping into, we'll call it the freelance or consultant era, I kind of had the ability to have a vision of how to make something or what it could be, but I couldn't personally get it there. And so then, whether that's a design thing, whether that's a user experience thing, whatever that might be, I could kind of map it out and, maybe dive surface level into many of the different things, but not actually what would provide the value to the client. And so pretty quickly it was like, oh, I need help. It wasn't I can do everything and so. And so I think some people in the agency space have that specialty where, maybe in your case, and you have a wide generalist background, it sounds like I do, but even in your case, potentially like someone can jump into like a development role as a developer, and then they like, this is just what they do, and then they can expand that and land much more work and more clients and grow that. But they kind of come in with that like real almost specialist kind of honed in skill. And I was more of a generalist when I started, and so it was easier for me to like have that outlook. And I'd hired a couple hundred people kind of over the course of 15 plus years before that. So just at different jobs and stuff. And so I think I probably came in with maybe a different angle or frame of reference or past story that some agency owners kind of start with. And so for me, it was like pretty easy to hire someone. It was well, let's figure this out, and this is my margin on this project, and this is what I can handle from like a gross margin, and here's what's left afterwards. And like I kind of just looked at everything through those lenses.
Right.
So then hiring for me really just was like, once I'm working with someone part-time, so say they're, call it 18 to 25 hours a week or whatever, I was like, oh, I think I can hire them full-time for roughly, in quotes, the same amount of money as I'm paying them as a contractor. Is there more expenses as a company? Of course. But like from a just, I can like have more of their time. They can fully be thinking about the business I'm working on. I can, pass responsibility to them, pass some authority to make decisions to them. Versus oftentimes if you're not doing that and you've kind of got freelancers or contractors that you're bringing in, you're kind of that hub that is still running the show. And that wasn't my end vision that I wanted. And so it was pretty easy for me to jump in and start hiring full-time employees from that standpoint. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think I'm just giving a little backstory because I know some people in the agency space do have a really hard time getting from kind of solopreneur land into building a team. And I pulled the trigger pretty quick on bringing people in. So
yeah, you talked about vision. We'll get more into vision shortly.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think again, just to draw a parallel here with kind of my path. When I started the agency, I just came out of a 3-4 year corporate job as a web developer. Running team, building a team, and doing all that, and running projects, and before that, I was a freelancer for several years as a web developer, designer, and so when I started my agency, I had the craft. I had honed my skills. So when I started out, it was very easy for me to do all the work. Right. And I'm like, but I had the vision. I called it an agency from day one because I knew I was going to build it into an agency. Well, that was my dream anyway. That was my vision. But I knew I could also leverage the relationships I had built, the other developers, freelancers I knew, to bring them in on projects as I needed it. More so just to be able to do more, not necessarily to do things I couldn't do at that point, but just to be able to do more projects or do things in parallel. And then for me, when it changed is I got a contract that required a dedicated resource, and that was my first hire. And then from there, it was always, and I liked how you kind of were breaking down a project and building into that project the people you would bring into the project to help you or whatever. That was kind of built into the pricing. And I would do the same thing from that point forward. I would get monthly contracts or whatever, and I knew I had this much space and I could bring somebody a resource in to work on that. And that's how I've kind of done it for years, is just that I don't hire before I have the funds or the contract or the project. They come in as I need them. So, and that's how it's built. But so that's it's interesting how that happens. And I suppose it's a little different for everybody. I find it interesting with you is that you kind of went into it as the generalist, already knowing that you're not going to do it all, you're going to get the projects, and eventually you'll just find people to plug in and do the thing. So
I think I learned, like, in the midst of, like, if you're working with professional athletes, your products, launching products into national brands, and you want Whole Foods to buy it, like, it's got to be awesome.
Yeah.
Like, they're just not buying stuff that's kind of like, hey, did your cousin do this? Like, that's just not happening. And so I think, I remember doing like our first big branding project, and it was like a custom bottle mold and this whole brand, naming extras, like all this stuff with this huge agency in New York. And it was like $200,000 or something like that in branding.
Wow.
and I'm kind of going, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I could buy a house for, you're kind of like, this is crazy, But I think in that process, and then, repeat that numbers of times, like, I just learned, it takes so much work to get something excellent. Like, just the idea of a client coming in and saying, hey, I want this thing that's going to sell and I'm going to make $1 million over the next 2 years because of this product. Can you just design this really fast? I just say no, because the really fast doesn't work.
Right.
Like that. You've got to really put the energy into it. And if you look at pretty much every successful product, whether that's a service or that's a digital product or a software or whatever, there is so much energy and effort put into it before any of us see it. And so I think I just learned that early on, whether that's by mistake or on purpose or whatever. But, and so I think that really like solidified that kind of, yes, I can open a design tool and I can outline and I can wireframe something and I can put colors to it and I can put a mood board together and all those types of things, because I kind of just have had to learn that. But I know that from that point to getting it to something that, like website being an example, that's going to get visited 100,000 times a month or more, I'm not the guy that's going to be able to get it from, point A to all the way to Z kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it just is a unique perspective from that standpoint. And I would argue that for most people, like, they need that. Like, as you've grown and like brought other people in, there's just different, levels of expertise that they're probably better at it than you are, or that you would be, in those scenarios, but it's elevated your level of service and level of excellence and all those types of things getting to clients. And I think that people find that. I just would encourage people to get there faster, whatever that looks like. Some people I just had a conversation with an agency owner yesterday about hourly rates, and they were afraid to spend $50 an hour on someone to help them write website copy. And it was like, I don't know if you can find anybody that's any good for less than that. I just had a different perspective of not that you shouldn't pay attention to your costs, but you need to go find, in my kind of, I guess, my own mindset or opinion has been, find the person you can afford, like not like on budget, but go, hey, what's the most money I could possibly afford, or the best person I possibly could afford, most skilled person I could afford for any role. And that's kind of how that's how I run the agency, is just kind of bringing people in, and in some roles, you're not maybe as seasoned or as established, and you kind of have to start maybe a little more green or kind of more junior, and you can work your way up. But anyway, that's kind of what has been my philosophy with it. That could be totally backwards, and people are going to get frustrated with that. But,
I don't know if there's like in many things, it's not a right and wrong way. It's what works for you.
Yeah,
and,
true.
And
Yep.
yeah, it's for me, as I was listening to that, I'm thinking, well, I mean, I think there's different personalities out there. Some want to just be like, I can do it all, or no one can. The old, no one can do it better than I can, or not gonna, or afraid to give that to somebody else. And for me, it's so liberating, and it makes me happy. It makes me happy when I'm talking to a client about a project or another agency, and we're talking projects, and I know I got that guy or gal on my team that is going to just knock it out of the park, or if they can't figure it out, no one else will. And to have those people on your team that can do that, I mean, and I take pride that there's people on my team that are probably are smarter in certain aspects of development and and stuff that where they have a group of people to go to that we can, put our minds together. And so that, it is powerful. And so like talking about the vision, I mean, that's something that, like I said, I started out, I called myself an agency before I was probably technically an agency,
Sure.
because I had a vision for my business from day one. Like, if I had done the freelance thing, I had done the work for somebody else thing as a web developer. Now I wanted to try this agency thing, and to get there, I knew I kind of had the plan. I was going to, like I said, I had contractors. I'd bring them in for specific projects until things aligned where I could start bringing people in full time and grow the team. And I even have a QA guy now. But
totally.
is that, let's talk about vision a little bit. How important is that for, somebody that wants to, I guess we're talking agencies today, but for any kind of business, going into a business without a roadmap where you want to go and a vision for where you want to go. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be like a personality that's pretty motivated by the long term. So, like willing to, kind of grind through the hard stuff, knowing that what I'm working for is, whether it's a month or a year or 10 years down the road, whatever, kind of putting the effort and putting the energy in to have like longer term returns has pretty easy to motivate me with. I know that's not everybody. So like for me, that has been, and that's actually what gets me out of bed in the morning is, hey, what am I building? What's the point of this? Like,
right.
We're going to do things during the day that we're not interested in and, doesn't seem fun or, not open to, but yet you still have to do it. And so it's helpful when you can connect those two. Oh, I'm doing this for this because of, X, Y, Z down the road.
Right.
So I think for me, vision has been, at least in the seasons of my life where I've had a real clear vision and been really kind of, I guess, amplified or whatever you want to say to like go chase it. Those have been the most fun seasons. And a lot of that has been because of the fact that I've put the energy in to kind of come up with, well, what am I trying to do? Like, what's the point of this? And I think that like that's helped me from one kind of, I guess, chapter of life to the next or season of life to the next to be able to like kind of have that, like going back to the story you kind of mentioned about like the kind of in some ways a little bit of a fork in the road, kind of choose between, pouring myself into more hours on the road in the career versus being around my family a little bit more. It was a pretty easy decision, to be honest, because I'd go, oh, but if I fast forward 20 years, I want to have a relationship with my kids. Like that's just was important to me.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I mean, not that everyone's probably going to say that. But I think for me, I was like, no, that's actually really important with me. And some of that was just, again, going to upbringing, going, back to the different things that have formed you is, I didn't have the best relationship with several members of my family growing up. And so some of that was because they weren't available. Some of it was my fault. It's a two-way street, 100%. But I knew that for me, I go, man, I can kind of impact these kids in my immediate family's life. And so how do I do that? And so that choice was actually pretty easy of like, oh, of course I'm going this direction. I have no idea what that means, but of course I'm going that direction. But without the vision of long-term wanting to have an impact and have a relationship with my kids in 20 years, I probably wouldn't have made that decision. I mean, money was great. There was some cool, opportunities I had career-wise, was stacking stuff to the resume, learning a ton, being challenged, all the stuff from a career that you're like, why would you not do this? So I'd kind of apply that like, towards, building an agency. And I know for me, I'd say just like learning wise, I have a shelf life. Like I love to build stuff. Like that's so fun to build stuff. But if we're talking maintain and we're talking just kind of like when I talk to people about growth and hey, I'm hoping I grow 3% this year. I just kind of go, I'm out. Like, that's just not fun. I would rather grow, 30 minimum % every year kind of thing. Cause I kind of am like, yeah, exactly. I just would say like, that's just, again, from my personality, that's what motivates me. I know that's not for everybody, but I think like what has helped me, like all of those things helped kind of build like guardrails into helping me establish what a longer term vision is. Just knowing that if I jump into starting an agency and say, hey, I'm going to do this between now and when I'm 72. No, I'm not. Like probably no one really is going to do that. But like I actually did have a vision of this is what I want to build and what I want to go out and do. And it took a while to kind of redo that. I'd kind of write it down and I'd look at it again and rewrite it and, kind of just, and it starts with bullet points for me. And these are some of the things I guess I might hope might happen. And then, you kind of revamp those and over time it becomes a lot more kind of crystal clear and you can put like numbers to it and, someday hope to sell it and it could be this much and why is it this much? Well, I want to be able to, put this much over here and buy this for that and buy, and you kind of outline it and really start to put some kind of emphasis and thought behind it. But one of the things I've found about vision and about going that distance to actually have that vision for your business is it really does help make decisions. So I think I go back to hiring people and I go, oh, if someday I wanted to maybe move out of the founder CEO, everything revolves around Tyler role, then I have to have somebody that I have to have people that are here to do that. It's not going to just happen with a machine.
Right.
And I think some people might argue that based on AI.
I was just gonna say
anyway,
it.
yeah, totally. So maybe it's a bad example, but I think people understand what I'm saying around like, you just got to like be able to pass responsibility and authority to make decisions and stuff off to people and kind of build a team that like runs without you. And if you've ever been in the freelance spot and you wanted to take a vacation, you kind of, most people go, how does this work?
Yeah.
I'm not going to make money and I'm just going to spend money. You've got to have a unique personality to be comfortable with that. Lots of people don't.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it was like, I want to build an organization that operates and functions without me here. And that was like really like the main kind of emphasis early on.
Yeah.
And it's so fun to say that because you're like, that's so inspiring and that's so cool. And you're like, good luck, it's really hard. You know, it's really hard to do. And like the amount of energy and, kind of fall on your face, like I said earlier, has to happen because you're, I didn't realize I communicated that way or didn't communicate that way. And I have to now, go the extra mile to be able to like bring somebody into the loop and training and coaching and, all sorts of different things that kind of fall in that mix. But all that being said, kind of using that longer term vision as a filter to help make decisions in your organization. You're going to take risks every day as an entrepreneur and someone that runs and operates a business. And you obviously want to calculate those risks and all sorts of things, but you might as well have those risks pointing you in the right direction for what you want to build versus just kind of like, path of least resistance or whatever. It'll get dictated to you if you don't have some sort of like, unction to go out and get it. So anyway, those are kind of a couple of the guiding points along the way for me, but a lot of it's been kind of using that vision as a filter to make decisions. So
yeah, well, I like having that vision, like you said, can help you make the decisions. Like otherwise, you're just kind of blindly going wherever the world takes you and going with the flow. And it's okay to go with the flow a little bit, but at least the flow is can at least steer you back and keep you on a sort of a large path where you're going. But I found it interesting. You were talking about how writing it down and stuff. I think that kind of crystallizes a little bit, right? And it's almost like a live document too, where you're just every year or every so often you pop in there and like what's changed, what new opportunities have arisen this year that I'm taking advantage of that might get me there faster, or do I have to make some adjustments and not do this thing over here anymore so I can get over, so those are always decisions too to take you to that longer term goal, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I would say I think for me, I have struggled. I mean, this is an honesty moment, but I've struggled with being a generalist pretty much my whole life. Because oftentimes the specialists are the ones that get the recognition. They just do because they're really good at something and that's just what they've focused on. And as a generalist, it's like, well, what am I going to do today? I could do 7 different things. I wear 19 different hats in every role. And that there is an element of that where specialists can't do that. And obviously I'm just talking about 2 specific roles and they're big buckets and I get that. And so I think for me, I really have, I suppose fought, but also tried to really sift through as a generalist, what am I good at and what am I not good at? And I read a book, this would have probably been like maybe 2010, 2011. It was a Stephen Covey book. I can't remember the exact title. All I remember is the quadrant that was in it. And it was essentially like making everything that you do and putting it at each level of the contract. Was it 5 habits or the...
7.
7 habits? Yeah. Right.
7
so
habits
anyway,
of highly successful people, probably.
Sure. It's got those words in it. So if you search those combo of those words on Amazon, you'll probably find the book that I'm talking about. But he essentially has this quadrant. It's, so imagine a quadrant with 4 2 lines like a T, and then there's, kind of 4 different boxes. And kind of top right was important and urgent, bottom or top left was important and urgent, and bottom left was not important, not urgent. And then there was above those was an important but not urgent, and then not important but urgent kind of things. And I kind of changed it a little bit to I love it and I'm good at it. I love it. I'm bad at it. I hate it and I'm bad at it. And I hate it but I'm good at it. So I had these kind of 4 quadrants. And so once a quarter, I would do a 2-week exercise where I'd track everything I did. And so I'd time track or whatever it was to go, well, what am I spending my energy on? Am I in meetings all the time? Am I emailing all the time? Am I on sales calls? Am I commuting? Am I what's taking up my time? And so you'd have this list of things that you did in the last 2 weeks. And then I would kind kind of basically I'd like put them in that quadrant. So, hey, do I like this? Am I good at this? And then I'd have different people I worked with. I'd just sit down with them for 5 minutes and go, hey, this is what I'm working on. Like, you've worked with me. Do you think these things fit in the right categories? Like, am I lying to myself saying I'm good at this or whatever? And so you kind of just take that honest feedback. And then, I mean, this was probably, I bet I did this for 6 years, maybe longer. And so then I kind of really tried hard to hone in on like, what was I good at? What was I bad at? What did I like doing? What did I not like doing? And so then it became like back to hiring and building a team. It became really easy for me to go, well, what are the roles I need? I'm not great at accounting. Okay, great. So hire a bookkeeper. Well, I probably don't need a full-time one. So that's going to be a contractor role. Cool. That's over here. I'm not great. I love to sell. I love to brainstorm, love to strategize, but I'm not great 6 months into the same client contract over and over and over again, just trying to add value. I can do it, but I just am not great at it. And so I need to hire like account managers that are incentivized to like build that role out and do those types of things. So it's like, I keep going down that kind of trajectory. So it helped me really understand how to uncover what was I good at, what was I not, even in the midst of I'm a generalist. I can go kind of do a little bit of everything and I can kind of go surface level on lots of things. But how do I get to the spot of where I kind of am really honing in on what I like doing and what I'm good at? So anyway, I don't know if that makes sense, but that helped me a ton in that process of creating a vision. And so that kind of combined with that, hey, what do you want to do? Really did help kind of tell that story for me early on. And then it's still, I mean, every season of life, I feel like you kind of have to, almost wipe it, start over, reassess, revamp it drastically. Reassess it. I think it's important to kind of constantly be looking at it.
Yeah, it's not a one-time thing at all. And I do the same thing with my team. It's what's happened over time. There was certain points where I got, I remember my first VA. It's like, I don't need to be doing all these things. I'm much more valuable coming over here to, not do the admin stuff so much, or she helps me with distribution of content, all that stuff that I don't need. I can help with the content. I can, but having that and figuring that out over time, right, it becomes kind of baked into your vision and where you want to go and what you want to do. Where do you see yourself a couple of years from now doing? And I think for me, it's always been, I always knew I was going to have a team just because I feel like it allows me to do more and it allows me to focus on the things I enjoy doing. And I love that quadrant, figuring out what you enjoy and don't enjoy, or what you're good at, aren't good at, and figuring that out.
And you got to ask people, because usually most of us lie to ourselves that we're good at something that we're probably not good at. So I feel like I learned a lot in just asking.
Yeah, if you have good people around you, I don't know, it's harder with, to ask employees because they're going to say you're good at everything.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But you got to have, if you have partners though and stuff, and that, or you just, but so in overall, I think too, like I said, it kind of knowing where you're headed. So like with me in my agency, I have this other component that I knew I was going to go after. And there's a reason for it, because there's a vision for my agency. It's not just agency, there's a products component to what we do. So we've been kind of developing these products for a couple of years, and basically they're just WordPress products, WordPress plugins, but it bakes into what we do. And it actually does, because we build sites with our own products. But that is the side of business where I see a vision for my team and what I need to do to step away more and be able to take those vacations more. I can start to do it. I have a project manager and people to watch things as I'm gone for a few days, but I want to grow that more so I can disappear for a few weeks and no one even knew I was gone. But the product line serves the vision. Because if I can build that's another revenue stream, and I can invest more into our resources and people, and that's all taken me to the grand vision. Now, my vision, I suppose everyone's vision has different timelines. My vision is I enjoy what I do, so I'm not in any rush to do. Like I don't in 3 years need to get this built and sold. It might be more like 10, 15, 20 years. Maybe I will be doing it still at 72. I'm in no rush. I'm 52. That's only 20 years from now. So
you got time. Yeah.
But I think that's, being able to have that long-term vision though, like I know why I'm building my agency. I know what type of life I want to have in my 60s. And what I'm doing today, the hard work I'm putting in and the decisions I'm making all serve that. And other reasons, but, and eventually I will, exit, and somebody's going to hopefully approach me and say, Matt, you're doing a great job with that agency. I would love to have it.
Totally.
Is that, we'll kind of land on this, but what's the end game? I mean, is that a big part of the vision? You have to know where you're headed, what that someday will look like, besides just how you want your life to look while you're building this business, but you have to know what's the end game, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think honestly, it's different probably for everybody a little bit. Obviously the specifics of what they want, but I think how you described it's a great way to approach it. Where, do you really want to work how you're working now every single day for the next 20 years? No, the answer is gonna be no from pretty much everybody. And kind of outlining a little bit more. So maybe it's some people maybe they want to play golf, maybe they want to travel more, maybe they want to take 6 months off and work 6 months, like whatever their kind of desired outcome is or what sounds, enjoyable to them. And then I think you kind of just have to reverse engineer it a little bit. I think that you've got to have some things in your vision that are, approachable soon. If people are saying, hey, I'd love to take, the ability to step away from the company completely. Well, awesome. So next August, 12 months from now, take the month off. It's like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. Yes, you can. It's 12 months away. Figure it out. Like, you can, but most people just wouldn't do that. And so anyway, so that's just like having kind of, I guess, carrots, if you will, along the way. But I think the end game is really important. I think whether it is you want to be an owner operator forever, maybe you want to step away and be more of like a, a board advisor at some point and you're not a day-to-day operation. Maybe you want to walk away entirely and sell it. I think it kind of just depends on, what people want from that.
Sure.
I've spent a ton of time in the mergers and acquisitions space in my career. And so I just was fascinated by that. Like, from people investing and, one company I was in the midst of, they raised $1 million or $100 million, and you're like, that whole process was fascinating to me, and so I think for me, I go, well, at some point, I've done a merger, I've done an acquisition, I've done several different things in the midst. And so, but at some point, I'd love to be acquired and go through that process.
Yeah.
But I also know I don't really want to work for someone necessarily. Like, I don't know how hireable or how good I would be at, having a boss at this point, which I'm sure you can relate and many can. And so that does require, though, that you build it to a certain way in which you could walk away the minute that you kind of throw the keys to them. And that's really unique in the services space. And so I think I've just paid a ton of attention to it, and so kind of have like put a couple different I guess hoops to jump through, if you will, to kind of get to that spot. But a lot of it is the end. Like, it's like, what's the end game? And do I want to do this forever, and do I have other interests? And we already talked about how much of a generalist I am, and probably how much ADD I am, actually. So but I think that it is really important for people to kind of sink into that enough and really think through it. I think it is really easy just to react to the day and to whatever the client need is. And I think for people that have done it long enough, you can do that for a decade. Yeah. I mean, literally just wake up each day, answer your client questions, go to the client meetings, work on the client projects, repeat. You might get a week or two off a year because you kind of force yourself to do it. And then all of a sudden 10 years goes by, and that's okay. Like, some people, that's awesome. That's just not how it fit for me. And so I think, spending some time to like map that out, and then really what your interests or desires are later on, I think is important too.
I think some people just get stuck in that daily grind and just doing the same thing and just trying to handle everything, put out fires. Yeah. And like you said, before you know it, years have gone by. And that's why I think, for me, it's been really, really important to always be revisiting the strategy and the vision often. And knowing that this is where we're headed, and to identify things that I need to change or do, or who I need to hire next. I always got who's next, because I'm serving that, because I know that, because this could be a whole nother podcast. So we'll try to truncate it a little bit here, but if that's the word, but you have to build, like, for a vision to sell a company, you have to have built it in a certain way. You have to have built the people, the processes. We talked about process. You talked about process earlier, documentation, everything set, and you also have the right clients and revenue, and there's a lot that goes into that. And so, but knowing that that's where you're headed, you're going to make decisions to get you there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Yeah, one last thing I just encourage people, if you're in that spot where you're trying to figure it out, it's okay to hire a coach. It's the same thing with, man, I have a hard time getting to the gym, work out a couple days a week. It's way easier if you do it with somebody else, be accountable. Like it just pulls you out of bed or whatever. I think it's the same thing with, having somebody that helps kind of, hey, how are you doing on this? Are we still going in this direction? Everyone responds better to actually having an outside voice that they have to answer to a little bit, And so it depends on people's personalities, but I'd encourage people to, find a business coach, find a mentor type role,
right.
Find somebody that's going to really help keep pulling you along. Cause I think in the specific industry that we're all in, it is really easy to just get bogged down by the overwhelming quantity of, challenges to solve, client problems, fires, all the things, that happen on a daily basis. And so, I just would encourage people to, find people that help pull you out of those fires long enough to look up, where you're going, and kind of keep tracking on the different goals you have set out.
Looking at this, it sounds like, you have biz coach on
that was not a soft plug for me. Happy to answer any questions or work with people. But
we're gonna end that, so we're gonna wrap it up here. But that's my last thing is like if somebody wants to if they want to reach out to you and find you on the World Wide Web and social media, your website, or maybe they need some help with your agency, from your agency, where can they find that, and what else where else can they hook up with you?
Sure, for sure. Those are always really funny because it's like I love, hey, how'd you meet? Well, we met online, and you're like, yeah, I met on LinkedIn or something. It's just comical at this point. But so our agency website is called loanforcreative.com. So LONEFIR, like the fir tree, and then the word creative. So check us out there. Some of the services, we write a ton of content, do all sorts of different things there. And then probably the best place that I'm the most active is on LinkedIn. So if you just search my first and last name on LinkedIn, and DM me, send me a message. I love to talk shop, love to talk about agencies. This has been my life for a long time. So it's fun to meet new people, and if there's a way I can add value, great. Otherwise, just being somebody that high fives and chest bumps and those types of things is also possible. So I'd look forward to any opportunity.
I love LinkedIn. That's kind of like my second home online. So it's just there's so many great people on there. It's a great environment, and like I said, to hang out and talk shop. Cool, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, till next time. Take care.
See ya.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you are interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.